Welcome to the Starfish Storytellers, the podcast that makes a difference one story at a time by bringing storytelling to life.
If you were to ask me as a child growing up in rural Wisconsin what my life would look like as an adult, I would have answered the sum of my decisions. Go to college, get a job, find love, marry, etc., etc. Now, I know that child to be very smart. She was spot on, but she did not know that it was all of the decisions that we make, those in our plan, and also the way we choose to handle the hard things. And life curveballs come to all of us. And I speak of experience because I've chosen to continue on, one step, one thought, one decision at a time, from several. So by my early 30s, I had made a lot of decisions. I had went to college, I obtained 2 degrees, I found many jobs, fell in love, married, even purchased a home in South Florida. But things can change in an instant, and life served me a curveball while I was taking out the trash. On a normal fall day, a massive tree limb, weighing 1,000 pounds from 30 feet in the air, out of nowhere struck me. The next thing I remember is waking up in the ICU 5 days later. The doctors put the pieces of the puzzle together for me, that a good Samaritan had found me laying there unconscious in the driveway with the tree limb, and they called the paramedics. So I thank that good Samaritan for the reason why I'm here, as well as a very skilled neurosurgeon. So I was in the hospital with a broken neck in an immobilization brace after neurosurgery, and I had a lot of time to think. The prognosis, it would be 1 year with the outcome uncertain. And with time on my hands, I looked at all of my life underneath the lens of a microscope. And I uncovered a trail of lies that my husband had not been faithful, and that high-powered career that I'd worked so hard to create forced me to resign. So in one fell swoop, that tree limb had a ripple effect and touched everything I held dear: my health, my marriage, and career. But I didn't know it at the time that it was an invitation. It was an invitation to make another decision, whether to rebuild the former life or to architect a new one. And I decided on the latter. And what that tree limb did for me was one of my life's greatest lessons. It reinforced that we only have control over 2 things, and that is to be in the moment and find the upside in any situation. So I took that ritual of whether it's looking up at the sky and seeing a beautiful cloud or a brilliant blue, or noticing a fall color change or a spring blossom blooming, into this next chapter of life. I started traveling the world. I penned 3 books at that time, and I found love again. And this time, the love was very different. The love was full of truth, connection, adventure, truly my other half. Brian Treptow and I moved to Hawaii together, and life was perfect. We envisioned adventuring, owning a treehouse camp together, and leaving no stone unturned. And this is when life served my most recent curveball, as Brian and I were living on the island of Maui, and life was seemingly perfect until it wasn't. He was a medevac pilot, and in saving or trying to save someone else's life, the plane that he was piloting crashed into the Pacific Ocean and tragically died in December of 2022. Unlike the tree, Brian's passing was not a physical hurt, but a complete body, mind, and spirit dropped to the ground, to my knees, and forced my life to stop. Not only my, at that time, life, but the life that we had planned together. And that's when I asked the world, really? Again? But although difficult, I leaned into that same lesson from the tree. And it reminded me that without that tree, I may not have been able to start to crawl, stand up again, and take one step in front of another after losing my life partner of 12 years. So I leaned into that simple lesson, and I have named it the Look Up Mantra. And as I said before, it reminds us of the things that we have control when everything else is spinning out of control. That we can be in the moment, look up from our technology device, look up from our situation, and appreciate the beauty around us, take a breath, and then maybe it doesn't happen immediately, but find the upside in your situation. It could be that you're just getting up from the ground from your last impossible hurdle, or it could be something as wise as the lesson I learned from the tree. The tree taught me resilience. Being in love taught me possibility, and loss reminded me how powerful that love was. So in showing you not the polished version of the end of my story, I'm showing you still some of the messy middle, because it's been only a little under 3 years since his passing. But I have since moved to Nashville. I have completed my 4th book, and I've found this creative mecca to be the best place for me to continue to be inspired by other storytellers and also inspire others by the stories that I'm telling.
Hello, my name is Liana Henry, and welcome to the Starfish Storytellers. I'm the CEO of the Black Dog Group and your host. I'm passionate about storytelling and on a mission to raise up the next generation of storytellers. We're called the Starfish Storytellers after the moral of the Starfish story, which centers on the power of one. Because no matter how big the challenge, every action matters. One step, one starfish, and one story at a time. Every episode will welcome a new storyteller who will inspire and connect with you. So thanks for tuning in. Now let's get started. Today's episode is Finding Perspective, Resilient Stories from Around the World. And with me today is Heidi Siefkas. Heidi,
Yeah,
I got that right?
you got it right.
Great. So Heidi Siefkas is with us today. Heidi is an author, a storyteller, and a speaker, and she has the Look Up Mantra, which began as a deeply personal promise to herself after a traumatic accident and has grown into a global movement reminding people everywhere to pause, breathe, and reconnect with what matters most. Today's conversation is going to explore how perspective becomes a survival tool and how one shift in how we see the world can open the door to healing, reinvention, and resilience. Heidi's latest book, Look Up, Global Stories of Resilience, brings together powerful narratives from people across cultures, continents, and experiences. These stories are the ones that remind us to keep perspective, that a perspective can change a life, and that resilience begins with a single moment of looking up. So, Heidi, it's just such an honor to have you here. I just thank you so much for being our guest.
You're so welcome. I'm thrilled to be here, and I brought some starfish.
I love starfish. They're my favorite. You can't see it behind my microphone, but I have my little starfish on. I always wear
Oh,
my
amazing.
starfish. Yes, yes, I'm always ready. Um, so I know that you just, shared your story with us, but was there anything else you would like to share, to introduce yourself to our listeners?
I think you covered it. I'm a four-time author, a speaker. I love adventure, and I'm the creator of the Look Up mantra. And we'll get more into that as we discuss.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for telling us your story. I mean, we had had some time to meet and connect, and I had some chances to read some of your stories in your book. And um, it's just, it's a powerful, you know, your story is just a powerful reminder about the power of perspective. Um, Perspective is something that we don't just find once, it's something we return to again and again, and it can change. Um, and what I love about resilient stories is that, they don't necessarily are going to erase your hardship, but they can help you make meaning from it. Uh, they can show us, the cracks and the light. So a good resilient story maybe doesn't say I overcame this as much as it might say how I kept moving one moment at a time, one step at a time. And that honesty, when you share those types of stories, it helps other people see themselves in the journey. It helps people not feel alone. So, you know, you have written other books as well, and I know that some of your other books have really been a focus on your story. But was there a specific moment where you felt that it was time, you realized that, you were going to share your story with other people? Like I know that I've seen your TED Talk, I've seen your, telling your story. Um, was there a point where you were ready?
It was almost 2 years after the tree had struck me, and my doctors, family, friends, everybody said, "You're 100% healed." And I said, I'm going to prove that to myself before I trust your judgment. So I said, I'm going to do it the best way I know how. And that's to challenge myself physically, emotionally, and mentally. And I said, I've got to go for a solo walkabout. So I was living in South Florida at the time. I said, I'm going to go to southern Chile, to Patagonia, and hike in Torres de Paine, the W Trek. And it was while I was on that adventure, we were in a group of hikers and two people from California, an older couple, probably approaching retirement age. They were wondering why I was solo hiking, what was my story. So I told them about my upbringing, kind of what I did professionally. And then the longer you walk with somebody, the more you can tell. And I told them about the last 2 years and how trying they had been. They basically were so shocked, and they said, your story sounds like a book. And they seconded that because they're from California. They said, you could probably also do a film. So it was on that hike that the seed was planted for my first book. And that was in 2011. I published that book in 2014. And what I found from publishing that book and sharing my story and becoming vulnerable with the world, and then doing speaking on this similar topic, it gives permission for others to share with you their authentic selves. And so, although there may be some listeners that want to share their story but are fearful of it, do it in a safe space,
Mm-hmm.
but it will pay off in the reciprocal effect, whether it's twofold, threefold, or fourfold. I've
Mm-hmm.
I have found just greatness in sharing these stories of resilience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. An aside, I think our listeners probably don't know this because I think I saw that you had been a travel agent or you had worked for helping people with tours or something at some
Yeah,
point.
for a time period, I was a tour guide for
Mm,
tours primarily going to Cuba, but I also had done some in Peru, Hawaii, Italy, Spain, the Camino de Santiago. So, yes, it has been the most challenging profession ever chosen because you are not just the tour guide, you're also the therapist, the paramedic, the chief cat wrangler, uh, DJ, entertainment, um, basically currency converter,
mm,
translator,
mm-hmm,
you name it.
mm-hmm. But you had so much knowledge about really good places to have some solo adventures to kind of, and I'm guessing, I'm just making an assumption here, when you went on that solo journey, I bet it was sort of, so often I envision people taking solo journeys and it's to find themselves or to kind of make peace with something. You know, there's so much power in nature and I love hiking too. So I would absolutely, a hike would be a place where, I could, come to peace with something. Um, so uh, did you, so you didn't really, you weren't thinking about telling your story in a book. It took that sharing of your story with another person and having them kind of echo back or give you feedback for you to feel like, you know what, I can do this. Did you find it very cathartic? I mean, did you find it something where it just, once you were putting your story down on paper, was that even like a deeper level of peace around that?
So when people ask me, was writing cathartic, I'm like, writing in a journal when it's happening is therapeutic.
Mm-hmm.
Then, once I made the decision to convert my journal entries into my book, I was reliving the experience, and you reopen wounds that you think are almost completely scarred over,
Mm-hmm.
and you no longer have necessarily that immediate team around you that helps you emotionally process that, whether that's physicians, therapists, and when you're in the thick of it, you probably also have some medications that are helping you with the pain and anxiety. So when
Yep.
you're writing this, you relive it in a way. Yes, you're capable of processing it a little bit differently, but I felt I needed to step away and not subject it in large chunks because
Mm-hmm.
there were multiple traumas in that tree and the ripple effect of loss. And each time that you're writing about things, it stirs up those emotions.
Yep.
And so I did need to take a step back. And I will tell everyone about writing um, your own story, that you should honor your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And I write nonfiction because Hollywood really can't make stuff up as good as real life. But that doesn't
Mm.
mean that it isn't painful to retell it.
Mm-hmm.
And I will share with you, when I did the audio version, I even got closer to my story. Now I was narrating my own words of my own story and hearing it through my voice. So, um, yeah, uh, therapeutic in journal entries, writing the book, not necessarily therapeutic,
Mm-hmm.
but definitely worth stepping into the fear. Just take it in small steps.
Yeah. I mean, writing about trauma, like you said, I mean, it can be healing, but it can be emotionally taxing. And, you know, like you're saying, listen to your body, listen to your thoughts, and find that balance. And if you have to step away to protect your emotional well-being, then that's what you do, right? Um, in the moments when you maybe did it and when you were doing the writing, like doing it in chunks or whatever, when you would come back to it, did you feel like your storytelling voice just kind of came back, like right, like picked up where you left off? Or was this something that you needed to kind of get, you had to, I know when I write, it's like sometimes it has to be the muse has to move me, right? It's like I have to be in the right mindset. Um, was it harder because it was this type of a story, a resilient story?
I guess I didn't write it completely chronological.
That's a
And
smart
so
thing to do.
I basically jumped around. So, what story or what journal entry am I going to write about today? And
Hmm.
I said, this one feels right today. And so that's one of the recommendations I would tell any storyteller. If you're putting pen to paper, don't worry about the order. Just get the story down. You can always shuffle things around, and it may, be a technique of yours to drop them in somewhere in the middle of the story, then go back and then tell it chronologically. But you have to get it out of your head or either dictated or written into some format.
Yeah. I have I teach guided autobiography to seniors. And as they get older and older, the typing is harder and harder. And so we sort of, and it's hard because they're old school, they're pen to paper folks, but a lot of the ones that are in my class they have some tech savvy about them. And, we've sort of resorted to trying the dictation, because you could do it right in Word. It's really
Right.
easy. So they could dictate, and they could do voice to text. And it's definitely saving some tired hands. And it gets the story out. Um, so yeah, that's a lot of tools out there we can use. So let's talk about the newest book. Um, it definitely is expanding beyond your personal experience at this point. So yeah, you're going from telling your own resilience story to other resilience stories. Like what sort of was it? Because I think the book had started prior to Brian's passing, right?
Yes.
Um, so what inspired you to start gathering those stories from other people? And I
I would
think
say
you have stories from all over. You have them from all over the
they're
world.
all over the planet from all walks of life. These are showcasing real life sheroes and heroes that have
Mm,
overcome obstacles of every assortment, from hurricanes, fires, immigration, escaping war, 3 generations of breast cancer, losing a spouse. And I started it because in sharing my story, people would come back with their own amazing resilient stories, but they didn't necessarily want to write a memoir. Maybe they didn't have the time, maybe they didn't have the skill set. And I was seeing a common theme in everyone that would share their story, as well as in my own library in reading memoirs and self-help books, that on the other side of this challenge, there was always this silver lining, you know, seeing the light through the cracks, turning lemons into lemonade. And I was thinking there's strength in numbers. And if all of us have done this incredible stuff, like ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and that we all come to a similar conclusion, well, that's better than me going to the top of the mountain and screaming, look up. It's, it communicates beyond me singing that if 2 dozen people from all corners of the planet, ages, ethnicities, languages, religions are saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I had participated in a compilation book called Tell Her She Can't in 2021. And that showcased how I could stop writing my story and level up and interview others about theirs and then be the pen to write that. And I am so grateful for those that had shared their story with me to make this a possibility. And after publishing Look Up Global Stories of Resilience, I've once again participated in another anthology. This one is about, it's called Unmapped, and it's about solo women travel. And I pen a little bit about that walkabout in Patagonia.
Nice. So let me ask you this. So the people that are in the book, in the Look Up Global Stories of Resilience, were they the people? How did you source the folks, the stories for that book? Were they the people that came to you after reading your other books and you said, "Oh, let me tap them and see if they want to be in my book?" Or was it just like a friend of a friend of a friend?
It was very organic. It was very much friends first, then a friend of a friend, then me asking those that had already shared their story, do you know somebody? And typically someone has a next door neighbor or a aunt or a colleague that has done something inspirational and just, doesn't wear it, on their forehead. I'm a shiro. And every story in the book came authentically to me. Yes, I did some social media outreach, but it was always them coming to me. And I kind of think of it like the Kevin Bacon effect. It was like this book was made by connections.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How wonderful that you have that many connections, or that you even built up even more connections as a result.
Even more connections, yes, to
Yes.
find stories from other countries. I needed to leverage some of my writing circles that were international. And then also being in the travel industry, that gave me another few tentacles to shout out, hey, do you know anybody that perhaps has an interesting story about solo sailing to Polynesia and is doing it to overcome PTSD? And they said, we know such a girl. So
Wow. Well, I mean, I think you're proof that like everybody's out, like they're out there, right? You know, these
yes,
these heroes and sheroes, they're out there, and how unique everyone's stories are. Um, so were there, so let me ask you this. So were there any common threads or surprising patterns that you noticed among people who've been facing these profound adverse? I mean, you had some pretty strong stories in that book. What was that common thread? Were there and you know what your resilience has become. Was there moments when somebody else's resilience shifted your perspective even more?
each and every story hit me hard because every one of the people in this book are true superheroes. I mean, I think everybody reads something that is just miraculous that someone has overcome and they think that they can't do it. And there's some of the stories in the book that I'm like, nope, I'm out. But there was a commonality in each and every story. And it was two things that connected them all. One was they leaned into the power of perspective, and each person said it differently. They maybe some saw a sliver of hope or light at their darkest moment, or they found there was no place else to go but up. Some resorted to prayer, meditation. Others said, yeah, I looked up And the second thing that they all said was that they found their community. They couldn't have done it alone. And so those two elements are what I think is the secret sauce to overcoming just about anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a lot of power in prayer and meditation, and there's a lot of power in community. Um, I think that there's a lot of people who isolate themselves, and it's a loss for them. It's at their detriment. And there's always sort of that warm feeling when you feel like I'm not the only one, you know. Um, and sometimes when you see, and I think just hearing your story, I think there might be people that are listening and hear your story and read your book and think, if she can survive all that, I can do this. I can do this too. And I
That's
think when you're talking about the hope, I think that's huge.
yeah, that's what I do hope for my books, my story, as well as the compilation of stories of others, is to give that hope so someone can take that next breath, next step, progress,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily getting over, but progressing or evolving to what that next self is.
Yeah, in one of the classes that I teach, that we talk about people's experiences with death and dying, and there's a lot of great YouTube videos of TED Talks of people kind of talking resilient stories, overcoming. And so often in those situations, people say, I don't get over it. I just move forward with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, so here you are, and you've got people's stories, and you're talking to people, and you're going to craft their resilience stories. Um, it's you're holding this very precious story, and I think even when we were prepping, you had told me a story of like someone came to you and felt like, they wanted to tell you their story, and then when they saw it in print, they were like, wow, I didn't know that, it hit them a little harder. Um, how do you ensure authenticity when you're entrusted with somebody else's lived experiences?
Your gestures were exactly what I wanted to say, which is I cradled their stories. So I found kind of the sweet spot of most of these stories. They needed to be in the past by at least 2 years for it to be a safe enough space for the wounds to have scarred over, for them to be able to share the story. And we did it via Zoom. So I thank the pandemic that it made people comfortable sharing such emotional things via video, because I still have about a third of the contributors that I have not met in person. That's one of the goals that I have, is to meet everyone in person over the next year. But to share the most emotionally pivotal moment in your life with a somewhat stranger, and with hopes of that being published, you have to be emotionally healed enough. And it didn't
Mm-hmm.
mean that people did not break down, because almost in each and every story, even if it was in 30 years in the past, sometimes they would cry up a little bit because it triggered what they felt when they were escaping at midnight from Laos to Thailand during the war. I mean, you can't, when you are trying to get the stories out of people, there's no timeline. You need to let it come out naturally and be very patient.
Mm-hmm.
And I let them talk for as long as if they needed to. Then I would go over the transcript and the video and create something that I thought did their story justice. But I wasn't the last judge, because my goal was for the book to inspire, but also for each of the contributors to feel proud about their story and how they were portrayed and the people in the story. So I would always, after doing the first draft, send it to the contributor. And that was the scariest moment for me, was when I pressed send and I sent them their story. Are they going to hate it? Are they going to love it? Are they going to edit it to death and it's no longer, you know, my my version of their story? But what was surprising is that they came back with very few edits. They just had some subtle changes if I had something inaccurate, and they said I couldn't have really done it better myself. With that being said, after everybody approved their story, I had that year-long gap after Brian passed. I couldn't write a book. I decided to restart life, move off Maui, head to Nashville with my 90-year-old father in tow and getting us both settled in a new place. So time had passed since half of the book was approved. And by the time I restarted the book, I now dove deeper into different stories, and those were written in 2024. But those that had been written in 2022, I needed to go back to them and say, has anything changed? Are you
Mm-hmm.
still comfortable with this? And some of them needed to be amended.
Mm-hmm.
There were some cancer survivors that were in remission then and now are not in remission any longer. So we amended the stories to be accurate as of publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And even though there was approval prior to sending to the printer, just like when I did my first memoir, I kind of panicked the night before it went live because it was getting real.
Yep.
This could be with a book club in Juneau, Alaska, or Paris, France tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of the contributors asked me last minute, did you use my real name or did we use, a fake name? And we had to kind of go back and forth. Why did you share your story? What were you looking to gain? What's your biggest fear? You know, we needed to talk through it.
Mm-hmm.
And the contributor that kind of had a small panic attack before publishing, she's now the biggest cheerleader of the book. She
Mm-hmm.
actually was in a panel discussion at a keynote that I did recently, and she shared her story for basically the first time in front of a public audience. And it was amazing to see such authenticity. It was raw, unedited, but it is so needed these days. So,
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, people know. People know if you're not authentic and you're not
yeah,
genuine, and that's really what what comes from the heart reaches the heart, So I think that's, and I think thank you for walking like us through sort of your techniques and like how you handled everything. I mean, you definitely cradled every single person and their story. Um, but you had a book to write and I think remind, like you said, you sometimes it's just kind of bringing people back to the purpose, right?
right.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've talked about people reading your book. I'm sure your book has been in that Juno book club and Paris book club. Um, and your books have a ripple effect, right? Um, so when somebody's going to finish this book or any of your books, what do you want them to carry with them? What is there a shift in perspective you want them to experience?
The through line in all four books is the look up mantra, and that tool that you can pull out of your back pocket. It's basically a mindfulness practice. And I think we're hearing it more and more these days that there's a benchmark that you have to have in your week of mindfulness practice to keep you at your best mental health. And look up is one of those things that you can do. not effortlessly, because you have to consciously choose to do it, but it's attainable.
Mm-hmm.
I would like that to be one of the takeaways. And then they're meant to inspire hope and positive change, and even to emphasize the choice you have to live your life boldly and to evolve, continue to evolve.
Mm-hmm. And in essence, you've created a community, I think,
Absolutely.
you know? Um, and it's sort of that domino effect, right? It's like one person's looking up, and then two people are looking up, and then four people are looking up, and then eight people are looking up. So, and then people aren't alone. So
Right.
we live in a world that needs hope right now.
The
So,
timing of this book couldn't have been more perfect.
mm,
Although it is an evergreen topic, you know, you're gonna run into life hurdles and hiccups next year too. But
mhm.
right now, I think we're in a time of uncertainty, and
Yes.
people are kind of grasping for, you know, how can I deal with job loss in the new AI dominated workforce
Right.
or the economy? Um, there's wars going on, and that doesn't stop the things that are still big: divorce, health, love, those
Yep.
things.
Yep. Yeah. So if we have a listener right now and they're sort of in the middle of their before and after moment, um, what would you tell them? Like what's that first small step towards finding that perspective again?
Breathe,
Mm,
even though you may feel like you're breathless, that life has socked you and you lost your wind, you know? Breathe, pause, look up, and find anything that can show you beauty, whether that is turning on your favorite song, looking up at nature, looking at pictures. And it may not come today or tomorrow, but there is wisdom and an upside to every hurdle, hiccup, and wound. It doesn't manifest itself immediately because you're probably laying on the ground, or you're having an adult temper tantrum, or you're in full blown catastrophe mode, but it will come. Just remember, breathe, look up.
I I pray and meditate in the morning, and I find that when you sit up and put your arms back, you're opening up your chest cavity so that you can take a deeper breath. When you're looking down, you're closing up that and it makes it harder to breathe and you can't take as deep a breath. And so when we're just talking about that looking up and take a breath, it's like, yeah, it's like it's so much easier to
Mm-hmm.
breathe. Get that deep breath, calming pause breath in there when you look up. So, so we've been talking about the resilience stories, these global resilience stories, but what's next for you, Heidi? Like what do you have any other projects? Are you on a book tour right now? Like what's your next great adventure?
Well, as soon as I published this book, someone else submitted their story via my Google form. And I'm like, oh, this would have been a great addition. And then more and more stories are coming at me. And I'm like, is it going to be a second book? And so I've been toying with it over the last 6 months since it was released. And I've decided to dive into the podcast world. So coming next
Great.
year, I'm going to start with the contributors and interview them on a live podcast, and then open it up to stories I've never penned, in hopes of continuing this lookup movement and building the community. There may be a second book, but it will be first told in podcast form and then converted into something written or audio in the future. So almost reverse engineering a book.
We're huge podcast fans here, so podcast is a great way to it's one thing, like you talked about the power of your voice, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
being a writer, putting pen to paper is one thing, but being able to actually have a voice is powerful. And with podcasts, you do have even more reach. And that your podcast will be able to be shared in ways that will your guests will be able to open it up to their communities and their followers. So it's a great idea. It's a great idea. So
And I'm excited. And so I am going on various podcasts to kind of learn this side of things. And I'm always on the hunt for my next great story. I haven't stopped freelance writing about travel destinations. So the next one that I'm writing about, I think, is the Grand Canyon because I'm doing a hike this coming fall from rim to rim, I think, is what we're
wow.
doing. So we had to postpone it because of the fire last year, but
Mm, that's
yeah,
exciting. That's exciting. How many times have you been to the Grand Canyon?
this will be my third time, but I've never done like really any in-depth hiking there.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel it's just a majestic place to be where every moment you get different shadows, colors. Um, and although Brian was well traveled, he never made it to the Grand Canyon. So I'm going to take him with me.
You're going for both of you.
Yes.
Nice. Nice. Well, enjoy. Sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
So, well, that is all the time we have for today. Heidi, thank you so much for sharing your story and about your journey with the stories of resilience with the folks that you've been writing about. You've reminding us that perspective isn't passive. It's something we choose. It's something we practice. It's something that can change our lives in 1 minute, in one breath, and in one story at a time, right?
Pleasure to be with you. And
And thank you for bringing your starfish. We appreciate
yeah.
it. And to our listeners, whether you've first heard us locally through BTV studios in Bedford, Massachusetts, or you're tuning in from across the globe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Amazon Podcasts, thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next time. Happy storytelling!